When a rookie nurse overhears a millionaire doctor's conversation, she discovers something horrifying. But when she decides to act, she never expected the doctor would push her from the top floor. Yet what the dog did was unbelievable. If you're a fellow animal lover like us, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss any heartwarming stories. Thanks. Now, back to our story. Sophia adjusted her brand new name tag on the pocket of her white coat, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. The new Life Clinic, with its walls in soft shades of blue and white, represented everything she had dreamed of since her days at St. Hope's Orphanage. The characteristic hospital smell, which many found unpleasant, held the promise of helping people, just as she had once been helped. As she walked through the polished hallways on her first day, her white shoes making a soft tap-tap on the floor, Sophia observed the luxurious details that made the clinic one of the most prestigious in the city. Modern art paintings decorated the walls, and the reception armchairs seemed more appropriate for a five-star hotel than a medical facility. "Miss Silva?" A deep, controlled voice made her turn. There he was, Dr. Alexander Mendez, owner of the clinic and one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the country. Tall, with perfectly trimmed grey hair and piercing green eyes, he emanated an aura of authority that made Sophia instinctively straighten her posture. "Yes, doctor. Sophia Silva, the new nurse in the cardiology department." She extended her hand, proud of how steady her voice sounded, despite the nervousness that made her heart race. Sophia felt her face flush. "The orphanage was my first home, doctor. Sister Constance taught me the value of care and dedication to others." As they walked down the hall, a cheerful bark echoed, and a golden retriever with golden fur and a blue therapy vest approached, wagging its tail. "Max, behave!" a nursing technician called out, but the dog had already sat at Sophia's feet, looking at her with intelligent, affectionate eyes. Sophia bent down, delighted, and scratched behind the animal's ears. "Therapy dog, how wonderful! I didn't know the clinic had such a program." In the following hours, Sophia was introduced to the clinic's routine, the rigorous protocols, and the staff. But it was during the visit to the recovery wing that something caught her attention. An elderly lady, Mrs. Mary, was being readmitted. It was her third admission in 2 months after heart valve surgery. "Yes, dear. Dr. Mendez says they're normal complications, that I need to be patient." The lady sighed, looking exhausted. "But my savings are running out with so many admissions." "Sophia, we need to review some medical records in my office." His tone was casual, but there was something in his eyes that made her hesitate. "Now, please." Dr. Mendez's office was exactly as Sophia imagined it would be, imposing with dark wood furniture and a privileged view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Diplomas and certificates covered an entire wall, silent testimonies to decades of dedication to medicine. "Yes, doctor, although..." Sophia hesitated but decided to continue. "Mrs. Mary's case caught my attention. 3 readmissions in 2 months isn't a little unusual for valve surgery?" "Of course, doctor. I just thought maybe we could review the post-operative protocol, perhaps implement some additional preventive measures." Sophia nodded, but an uneasy feeling persisted. In the days that followed, she immersed herself in her routine at the clinic, quickly gaining the respect of her colleagues and the affection of her patients. Max, the golden retriever therapist, became her constant companion during breaks, always appearing with his wet nose and hopeful eyes for affection. It was during one of these breaks, sharing her lunch with Max in the clinic's inner garden, that Sophia began to mentally organize her observations. It wasn't just Mrs. Mary. There was a pattern of readmissions that seemed peculiar. "Sophia, I'm glad I found you." It was Laura, one of the clinic's most senior nursing technicians. "I need help with Mr. Robert in 304. He's anxious about his new admission." Sophia felt her heart clench. "You have health insurance, don't you?" That night after her shift, Sophia stayed at the clinic, taking advantage of the silence to review some medical records. The stories repeated themselves. Seemingly successful surgeries, followed by complications that required new procedures, always with special materials paid for by the patients. "Oh, doctor, I was just studying some cases. You know how I am, always wanting to learn more." As she gathered her things, Sophia didn't notice the way Dr. Mendez was watching her, nor how his eyes narrowed when he saw the folders she was reviewing. But Max, who was passing by in his last round of the day with his handler, did notice. The dog stopped, looking alternately at Sophia and the doctor, a low, almost imperceptible growl forming in his throat. That night, driving home, Sophia made a decision. She couldn't ignore her suspicions. She needed to investigate further, but she would have to be extremely careful. After all, as Dr. Mendez himself had said, too much curiosity could be hazardous to her health. In the following weeks, Sophia developed a meticulous routine. She arrived earlier, left later, and took advantage of every free moment to document her observations. In a small blue notebook, a gift from one of the nuns at the orphanage, she wrote down details that seemed insignificant, but which together formed a disturbing picture. "Mrs. Anthony, would you mind showing me the invoices for the special materials?" Sophia gently asked, an elderly patient who was knitting in her bed, "just to check if everything is according to the clinic's protocol." As she examined the documents, Sophia felt her heart race. The prices charged were astronomical, far above market value. Even more intriguing, the product codes didn't correspond to any known manufacturer. Sophia swallowed hard, remembering her classes in college. The type of valve Mrs. Anthony needed was perfectly covered by insurance, with excellent quality materials. In response, Max pressed his nose against the pocket of her coat, where the small blue notebook was. Sophia smiled, but her smile disappeared when she heard voices coming from the meeting room nearby. The door was ajar, and she immediately recognized Dr. Mendez's voice. "This quarter's numbers have exceeded all expectations," he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "The special materials scheme is working perfectly. Patients don't even question the prices when we say it's a matter of life or death. Helen, dear, you know very well that part of this money goes to revolutionary research. We are about to develop a new procedure that will save thousands of lives. The ends justify the means." There was a moment of tense silence before Dr. Mendez replied, "I'm keeping an eye on her. If she keeps snooping around, we'll have to take measures." In her small apartment that night, Sophia couldn't sleep. Dr. Mendez's words echoed in her mind. The ends justify the means. How could someone who had taken the Hippocratic Oath think like that? With trembling fingers, Sophia replied, "Yes." Her heart was torn between fear and determination. The measures that Dr. Mendez had mentioned frightened her, but as a nurse, as a human being, she had a moral obligation to act. Lying in her bed, hugging the old teddy bear she had brought from the orphanage, Sophia said a silent prayer. Tomorrow would be a decisive day, she could feel it. And while she tried to calm her agitated thoughts, across town, in the clinic's garden, Max sat alert, his eyes fixed on the windows of Dr. Mendez's office, where a light still shone late into the night. The clock read 6:15 a.m. when Sophia arrived at the coffee shop near the clinic. The establishment was still practically empty, except for some sleepy workers having coffee before their shifts. Laura was already there, occupying a discreet table in the back, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that looked untouched. Sophia ordered a latte from the waitress before turning to her colleague. "What documents are these you mentioned?" She slid the flash drive across the table. "They're cost spreadsheets, forged invoices, procedure records. Dr. Mendez keeps a parallel accounting system. The special materials he charges a fortune for? They're exactly the same as the ones provided by insurance. I do the typing of the medical records into the system. Sometimes I work late. One night, I forgot my cell phone in Dr. Mendez's office after taking some documents for him to sign. When I went back to get it, he had gone out for an emergency and left his computer unlocked." Laura let out a bitter laugh. "There is a research project, yes, but it's just a facade. Most of the money goes to accounts in the Cayman Islands." It's not that simple, Laura interrupted, leaning forward. Dr. Mendez has powerful connections, politicians, judges, other important doctors. Why do you think no one has ever investigated the clinic, even with so many patient complaints? That's why I came to you, Laura sighed. You're new, you have energy, ideals, and most importantly, you have an impeccable reputation. If anyone can expose this, it's you. Sophia checked her watch. My shift starts in 20 minutes. How can we? Come at 10 p.m. The shift changes at 9 p.m., so the traffic will have subsided. Enter through the employee entrance. I'll leave it unlocked. The rest of the day passed like a blur. Sophia performed her tasks automatically, her brain busy planning the next steps. In a moment of calm, she managed to call her former mentor from the orphanage, Sister Constance. It will be, Sophia replied, trying to sound confident. Just pray for me tonight, okay? The dog tilted his head, his ears moving to catch a distant sound. Dr. Mendez appeared at the end of the hallway, and for the first time since she had started working there, Sophia felt real fear of the doctor. There was something calculating in his smile, something predatory in his green eyes. Night fell over the city like a heavy cloak of black velvet. Sophia parked her car 2 blocks away from the clinic, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. Laura's flash drive weighed in her pocket as if it were made of lead, not plastic. The service corridor was silent, except for the distant hum of equipment. Her steps, even careful ones, seemed to echo deafeningly. A nurse passed by in a hurry but barely noticed Sophia. It wasn't uncommon for employees to return to retrieve something forgotten. A familiar sound broke the silence, the jingle of Max's collar. The golden retriever emerged from a side hallway, his unexpected presence at that hour causing even more apprehension in Sophia. Sophia spun on her heels. Dr. Mendez was standing at the entrance to the nurses' station, still wearing his spotless coat, despite the hour. His smile was cordial, but his eyes were cold as ice. Sophia felt her mouth go dry. Max moved, positioning himself subtly between her and the doctor. Difficult choices. Sophia found her voice, her indignation momentarily overcoming her fear. You're stealing from desperate people, people who have sold everything they had. Something darkened on the doctor's face. Last chance, Sophia. We can forget this conversation. I can even increase your salary, give you that promotion you deserve. Or, don't you dare hurt him. Sophia took a step back, her mind working frantically. She needed to get out of there, alert someone. The doctor's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say she decided to accept a generous transfer offer to a hospital very, very far away. Sophia ran like she had never run before, Max at her side, his paws silent on the cold floor. Where to go? Upstairs was the penthouse. She'd be cornered. Downstairs, the archive. If she could reach the documents Laura mentioned. The steps of the emergency exit seemed endless as Sophia descended towards the basement, her steps echoing on the concrete walls. Max stayed by her side, like a protective golden shadow. Above, excited voices and heavy footsteps indicated that security was already in motion. The air became colder and heavier with each flight of stairs they descended. The emergency lights flickered, creating a surreal environment. Sophia couldn't help but think of Sister Constance and her words about courage. Did she imagine that her pupil would one day be fleeing down an emergency staircase, pursued by a corrupt doctor? Finally, they reached the basement. The heavy metal door creaked as Sophia pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. Piles of boxes and old equipment created a maze of shadows. There, Sophia spotted a door with a faded sign, Records Archive, Restricted Access. The documents are all here, aren't they? Sophia kept her voice steady, despite the fear. The evidence of all your scams. And I transformed a mediocre clinic into a center of excellence. How many lives have we saved here? How many revolutionary researches are we developing? That dog is really starting to annoy me, Dr. Mendez sighed. Take him to the quarantine area. Tomorrow morning we'll arrange his transfer. Sophia felt the weight of the flash drive in her pocket. All the evidence Laura had collected was there. Laura, what had really happened to her? Enough, Alexander. Her voice trembled slightly. I can no longer be complicit in this. You fool. Dr. Mendez advanced, but Max placed himself in his path, teeth bared. Don't you understand? Everything I've built, everything we've achieved. The documents are in the back vault, Helen explained, guiding them between the shelves. We don't have much time before he uses his master key. We need to... Why are you helping us now? Sophia asked as they ran, Max always alert at her side. Here! Helen stopped in front of a false wall, skillfully removing a panel that revealed a digital safe. Alexander never knew about this safe. I secretly installed it 5 years ago when I started keeping the evidence. It's all here, Helen explained, her hands trembling as she picked up the folders. True invoices, records of payments into offshore accounts, a list of injured patients, even recordings of meetings where he admits to the scheme. Fear, Helen admitted, tears in her eyes, and guilt. I was complicit for too long, but when I saw you investigating your courage, I realized it was my chance to do the right thing. Sophia was still frantically photographing the documents when they heard the click of the lock. Max positioned himself between them and the entrance to the corridor, growling low. Before Sophia could protest, Helen moved out of range of the shelves towards the doctor's voice. Achieved. Or did you achieve, Alexander? How many millions do you have in the Cayman Islands anyway? Sophia finished photographing the last folder, her heart pounding. The photos were already being automatically uploaded to her personal cloud storage, a setting that now seemed providential. Excessive sensitivity, Dr. Mendez sighed. It's always been your flaw, Helen. In our business, we need to be... The golden retriever shot silently between the shelves. Sophia took the opportunity to put away her cell phone and cautiously approach the area of the conflict. That's enough! Sophia's voice echoed through the archive. She held her cell phone like a weapon. It's all recorded, Dr. Mendez, and not just on my phone. It's already in the cloud, with copies sent to multiple emails. At that moment, sirens began to sound outside the clinic. Helen smiled, still trapped under the shelf. You don't understand, he murmured, running his hand through his immaculately combed gray hair, now disheveled. All the good we've done, the lives we've saved. With Sophia's help, Helen managed to free herself from the fallen shelf. She limped slightly, but her eyes shone with renewed determination. 20 years torturing me for being complicit in your crimes, she replied, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. 20 years watching you destroy the lives of innocent and vulnerable people. I can make it worth your while, he offered, his voice taking on a persuasive tone. Helen knows my accounts abroad. We can split everything, start a new life somewhere else. Several police officers emerged from the shadows, guns drawn. Dr. Mendez let the piece of metal fall, the metallic noise echoing like a funeral bell for his career. And we have dozens of complaints, the detective interrupted him, gesturing for 2 officers to handcuff him, in addition to substantial evidence of fraud, extortion, and various other crimes. We need your statements, he said gently, and all these documents will have to be catalogued as evidence. The detective made a note in his notebook. We will investigate immediately. Any idea where she might be? As Sophia and Helen recounted the events to the detective, the activity at the clinic increased. Police cars, forensic vans, and even some TV station vans began to gather outside. I still can't believe we did it, Helen murmured, watching the forensics team working. So many years keeping these evidences, waiting for the right moment. Morning arrived at the New Life Clinic, bringing a completely different atmosphere. The corridors, normally silent at that hour, were swarming with police officers, investigators, and stunned employees. The news of Dr. Mendez's arrest had spread like wildfire, and reporters were crowding at the entrance, eager for details. Sophia watched everything from the employee break room, a cup of untouched coffee between her hands. Max slept at her feet, exhausted after the eventful night. Helen was in another room, still giving a formal statement. Sophia nodded gently. Yes, Mrs. Mary, all those readmissions, the extra payments, they weren't necessary. You and many other patients were deceived. At that moment, Detective Rodriguez entered the room, his face showing fatigue but satisfaction. Miss Silva, we found Laura. There's more, the detective continued. The searches at Dr. Mendez's house revealed an even bigger scheme. He had a network of doctors and clinics involved. Some are already being detained. The detective nodded. The court will appoint receivers to manage the unit during the investigations, but we will need trustworthy professionals to keep everything running. Sophia blinked, surprised. Me? But I'm the newest on the team. Sophia's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Sister Constance. I saw it in the newspaper, my dear. I always knew you would make a difference in the world. I'm on my way to the clinic. Okay, she wiped her eyes, a determined smile appearing on her lips. I accept, but with one condition. I want to expand the dog therapy program. Max has proven that our four-legged friends can do much more than just comfort patients. Helen laughed. I think after tonight, no one would dare question the importance of the program. In fact, she hesitated, looking at the detective, who nodded encouragingly. I've been thinking about using part of the recovered money to create a specific wing for alternative and animal-assisted therapies. And there's more, the detective added. Your story, especially the part about Max, is moving people. Several victims of the scheme who were afraid to report are gaining courage to come forward. Sophia looked out the window, where the morning sun was finally breaking through the clouds. The night had been long and frightening, but it had brought with it the promise of a new beginning. The New Life Clinic would live up to its name, rising from the ashes of corruption as a place of true healing and compassion. Max barked softly, as if agreeing with her thoughts. Sophia smiled, realizing that her journey had only just begun. There was much work ahead, many wounds to heal, much trust to rebuild. But, for the first time since she had begun to suspect the irregularities, she felt real hope for the future. The arrival of Sister Constance at the clinic brought a sense of familiarity and comfort that Sophia didn't know she needed so much. The nun, with her white hair and gentle smile, hugged her former pupil tightly, tears of pride shining in her eyes. Max, who had already approached the newcomer curiously, received an affectionate caress. And you, brave friend, took good care of her, didn't you? The next few months will be challenging, the court-appointed administrator explained, projecting graphs and numbers on the screen. The clinic has an excellent structure, but its reputation has been severely damaged. We need to regain the community's trust. Dr. Mendez's accounts abroad have been frozen, replied one of the auditors. The compensation process is already being structured. But in addition to the money, many will need proper medical follow-up. The project presented by Helen was ambitious. In addition to expanding the animal therapy program, it included the creation of a wing for integrative treatments, a social care program for low-income patients, and partnerships with universities for genuine research. After the meeting, while walking through the corridors with Max, Sophia found Laura, who had just returned. The two women hugged for a long time, words not being necessary to express the relief of the reunion. The following days were intense. The press continued to follow the case, but now the focus gradually shifted from the scandal to the story of renewal. The image of Max, the therapy dog who helped unravel the scheme, became a symbol of hope. You know what moves me the most? She said to Sophia during a therapy session with Max. Seeing how people here really care now. It's no longer about money, it's about truly caring. In her new office, much more modest than Dr. Mendez's former office, Sophia kept the small blue notebook where she had started her notes, now as a reminder. Beside her, a framed photo showed her, Helen, Laura, and Max in the clinic's garden, hopeful smiles on their faces. Max, who had earned a new collar with an official animal therapy supervisor tag, now had his own schedule of appointments. Other therapy dogs began to join the program, but he maintained a special status. It was common to see him making independent rounds through the corridors, as if personally supervising the clinic's progress. The transformation was just beginning, but each small change, each regained smile, each life touched by the clinic's new philosophy confirmed to Sophia that it had been worth fighting for the truth. Fear and corruption had given way to hope and true healing. 3 months had passed since the night that changed everything at the New Life Clinic. Autumn painted the trees in the garden in shades of gold and red, creating a welcoming landscape visible from the windows of the patients' rooms. In the new wing for integrative therapies, Sophia watched Max guiding a physical therapy session with Mrs. Anthony, the lady who had sold her farm to pay for the surgeries. Who would have thought? Mrs. Anthony smiled, stroking Max's golden fur while doing her exercises, that I would be here today, recovering not only my health, but also my dignity. Your family's farm will be recovered, Mrs. Anthony, Sophia assured, gently adjusting the patient's posture. The process of reversing the sale is already underway. Outside the therapy room, the clinic's activity flowed with a new energy. The walls, formerly decorated with expensive and impersonal works of art, now displayed photographs of the patients with their families and with the therapy dogs. A special mural showed the evolution of the animal-assisted therapy program, with Max as the main star. Laura, now coordinator of the medical records department, passed by the door, carrying a stack of medical records. Sophia, you won't believe it. 3 more clinics in the area have expressed interest in implementing our humanized management model. Helen, who oversaw the implementation of the changes as interim director, had created a training program for other institutions. It's not enough to clean our own house, she used to say. We need to help transform the entire system. A soft knock on the door announced the arrival of Sister Constance, who returned regularly to monitor the progress of the clinic. Still working, my dear. The nun sat down, her eyes shining with maternal pride. You know what makes me the happiest? Seeing how you transformed a moment of crisis into an opportunity for true healing, not just for the patients, but for everyone who works here. It was true. The atmosphere of the clinic had changed completely. The staff, once fearful and submissive, now actively participated in decisions. An ethics committee, formed by professionals and representatives of the patients, ensured that each new proposal was evaluated not only for its financial feasibility, but for its human impact. We received a letter today, Sophia commented, taking an envelope from the drawer. It's from Mr. Robert's son, that patient who almost lost his retirement with the unnecessary surgeries. Max raised his head, his attentive ears catching voices in the hallway. It was the new group of volunteers arriving for training, young medical and nursing students eager to learn about humanized care. Sophia got up, adjusting her coat. Max immediately stood up, ready to accompany her. In the hallway, the young and hopeful faces of the students reminded her of herself not long ago, full of ideals and determination to make a difference. The day of Dr. Mendez's trial dawned with a fine and persistent rain. Sophia adjusted her navy blue blazer in front of the mirror, trying to control her nervousness. In a few hours, she would face again the man who had almost destroyed so many lives, this time before a judge. Max, who would be taken to court as part of the story, an unusual decision by the judge, who recognized the dog's symbolic importance in the case, was already wearing his special collar, his name tag shining under the fluorescent lights. The courthouse lobby was crowded. Families of injured patients, journalists, healthcare professionals all awaited the start of the session. Laura, who had arrived earlier, came to meet them. When they entered the courtroom, the silence was immediate. Dr. Mendez, wearing an impeccable suit that couldn't hide his dejection after months of pre-trial detention, turned to face them. His gaze, once so intimidating, now seemed empty. When it was Sophia's turn, she felt her legs tremble as she walked to the stand. Max, authorized to remain close, kept his eyes fixed on her like a safety anchor. Sophia took a deep breath and began her narrative. She spoke about Mrs. Mary, about the suspicious patterns she had noticed, about the fear and courage that had alternated during her investigation. Her voice gained strength as she described the suffering of the patients, the families devastated financially. "No," Sophia replied, looking directly at her former boss. "He always justified his actions by saying that the ends justified the means, that he was funding important research." Unexpected tears sparkled in Sophia's eyes. It meant understanding that medicine cannot lose its humanity, that each patient is a person, a story, a family. They are not numbers on a profit spreadsheet. When it was the defense's turn, the lawyers tried to question Sophia's credibility, to suggest that she had personal motivations. But her truth was simple and unwavering, strengthened by months of meticulous documentation. "Silence," the judge ordered, but his eyes softened when he looked at the dog. "Although I perfectly understand the feeling." Sophia felt silent tears running down her face. They were not tears of anger or fear, but of a deep sadness for what greed could do to a person. "I started my career wanting to save lives," he continued, his voice choked. "Each successful surgery was a victory, each recovered patient a joy. I don't know exactly when the money became more important than the people. Looking back," Dr. Mendez continued, "I see a trail of destruction that I caused, not just financial, but emotional. I betrayed the trust of people who literally put their lives in my hands. The research I claimed to be funding was a lie I told myself to justify my actions. The truth is, I became addicted to power, to luxury, to status, and to maintain that, I compromised everything that medicine represents." "I'm not asking for clemency," Dr. Mendez continued, surprising even his lawyers. "I'm only asking for the opportunity to try to correct some of the harm I've caused. All the money in the accounts abroad, the properties, the investments, I want everything to be used to compensate the patients I hurt. And more than that, I want to donate my share in the clinic to create a foundation, an institution that will ensure that the New Life Clinic continues to be what it has become in the hands of Miss Silva and her team, a place of true healing." The judge removed his glasses, rubbing his tired eyes before speaking. "Dr. Mendez, your remorse and willingness to repair the damage are commendable. However, crimes have been committed, lives have been affected. Justice needs to be served." The sentence was pronounced with the solemnity that the moment demanded. Dr. Mendez received a significant sentence, but with reductions due to confession and collaboration. More importantly, all of his assets would be used to repair the damage and create the foundation. "Miss Silva," his voice was low, almost a whisper, "you did what I should have done a long time ago. Put the patients first. I apologize for everything I did, especially for the threats that night." "The clinic is in good hands," Dr. Mendez concluded before being led away. "Make it what I was never able to make it, a true place of healing." Sophia looked at Max, at Helen, at the entire team that now represented the new face of the New Life Clinic. The future opened before them, full of possibilities and responsibilities. The clinic's garden, now expanded and revitalized, was filled with guests, former and new patients, staff, health authorities, and of course a considerable number of therapy dogs with their handlers. The program that had started with Max now had more than 20 trained animals. Thoughtful, Helen approached, offering a glass of juice. Since she had officially assumed the executive directorship of the foundation, she seemed lighter, as if the weight of the secrets of the past had finally been removed from her shoulders. "And look what your dreams have built," Laura completed, joining them. As coordinator of the new Transparency and Ethics program, she now trained other healthcare institutions. "Dear friends," she began, "today we celebrate not only the transformation of a clinic, we celebrate the triumph of compassion over greed, of ethics over profit, of true care over appearances. This foundation," the sister continued, "is born of sincere repentance and unwavering courage. Dr. Mendez, in his search for redemption, transformed his mistakes into an opportunity for healing. And Sophia, our dear nurse, transformed her indignation into positive action. The Foundation's new research center, dedicated to integrative and humanized treatments, was already in operation. Medical and nursing students from all over the country signed up for the residency programs, attracted by the revolutionary philosophy of care. When the applause subsided, Sophia was called to the stage. Max naturally accompanied her, eliciting more smiles from those present. Her eyes scanned the audience, finding the faces that had been part of that journey. Helen, who had found the courage to confront her own mistakes. Laura, who had taken the first step by gathering the evidence. Sister Constance, who had always believed in her potential. Every patient who trusted us, every employee who chose ethics, every family who didn't give up on seeking justice, all of you are part of this transformation. And of course, she smiled, stroking Max's head, we can't forget our four-legged hero who has proven that sometimes angels have golden fur and a wet nose. Another bark from Max drew laughter and applause. Sophia concluded her speech, announcing the expansion of the Foundation's social programs and the creation of a support fund for treatments for underprivileged patients. Max lay down beside her, resting his head on her lap, as he had done so many times during those difficult months. Sophia smiled, feeling a deep peace. The new Life Clinic finally lived up to its name. It was a place of renewal, of new beginnings, of hope. The dog looked up at her, that wise and loving gaze that had comforted her so much in difficult times. On the horizon, a new day was dawning, bringing with it the promise of more lives transformed, more hearts healed, more stories of redemption and hope.